key to achieving substantial improvement in the disclosure of information about intangibles, both within businesses and to capital markets, is the construction of a comprehensive and coherent information structure that focuses on the essential, the value creation, innovation process of the enterprise, and places intangible assets in their proper role within the structure. The key to achieving substantial improvement in the disclosure of information about intangibles, both within businesses and to capital markets, is the construction of. What is he talking about? What I'd like to do right now is to help you learn how to write about accounting issues. So I'm going to address 5 different topics. The first is conciseness, then clarity and organization, cliches, gobbledygook, point of view, and voice. First, concise. You got to explain your point using as few words as possible. Omit unnecessary details and shades of meaning. Sometimes it's tempting to say extra things just because you want to make sure people get exactly what you're saying. It's not necessary. Clarity is all about organizing your thoughts very carefully and using simple sentences with the active voice. And I'll talk about what active voice is in a minute. It all comes down to sentence structure like you learned in 2nd and 3rd grade. Subject, verb, object. If your sentence if you're not sure of the subject, the verb, and the object in your sentence, then your sentence is probably not very clear. Cliches. Cliches are little expressions that oftentimes come to mind very easily, but they've been used for so long that they're tired, they're vague, they're confusing, and they generally don't mean anything. For example, let's take it to the next level. Let's create synergy. Now we know what synergy is, maybe, but when someone says, let's create synergy, they're really not saying anything. Here's another one. Bite the bullet. We gotta bite the bullet. Does the term bite the bullet add anything to what you're trying to say? It rarely will. Gobbledygook. Now, the name of it's a little weird. This is basically when you write something that's pretentious, wordy, and confusing. I put it in here because graduate students tend to do it. What they want to do is they want to mimic what they see as professional writing. And instead it backfires and they create something that's unreadable. Kind of like my book on intangibles here. So gobbledygook is made to impress the reader rather than to help him or her understand what you're trying to say. Here's an example. Please be notified that an assessment has been made and it has been determined that the period of your employment will continue until August 31st, after which time said employment will be subsumed by the company's restructuring program. Now, that sentence could probably be simplified into something that's much clearer and easier to understand. You're fired. Point of view and voice. This is a source of much confusion among students. Point of view establishes who's doing the action being the verb. It goes back to what we said before. Subject, verb, object. Who is the subject of your sentence? Who is doing the action? Sometimes you don't want to say who's doing the action, but most of the time you should say who's actually performing the verb. You could be the first person, i.e. I, second person, you, Third person, he or she. Plural or singular, plural would be we, you all, if you're in the South, or them. But the point of view in most sentences that you write should be clear. And this brings us to voice. Voice is all about the relationship between the subject and the verb. In active voice, the subject is actually doing the verb. Like we said, subject, verb, object. The boy plays ball. Passive voice would be a situation where the subject is being acted upon, and it should be used very carefully. It's not against the rules to use passive voice, but you should be careful when you use it, and you should not use it in too many sentences. An example of passive voice is ball is played. So now let's go through an example. My example is this. You can read the sentence and you can download it nearby. The component of the allowance for retail finance receivables is collectively evaluated for impairment is based on a statistical calculation which is supplemented by management judgment. A combination of forecasting models is used to determine the allowance for loan losses. Factors that are considered when estimating the allowance include the percentage of historical delinquency migration to loss and the probability of default and loss given default. The loss confirmation period is a key assumption within the models and is the average amount of time from when a loss event first occurs to when the receivable is charged off. An evaluation of overall portfolio credit quality based on various indicators is also considered. Now, let's work this sentence so that it can start to make sense. Let's go through this sentence by sentence. First of all, what are we talking about? What is this whole paragraph about? And that's very important because that's the main thing that we want to drive home here. It's about how they evaluate the allowance for receivables for impairment. So it might be nice if we write here at the very beginning, impairment of retail finance receivables. Now, let's see. The component of the allowance for retail finance receivables that collectively evaluated for impairment is based on a statistical calculation which is supplemented by management judgment. Let's look at this first sentence here. What is the verb of the sentence? What is the action? And I'm going to go through this pretty quickly so you can just get an idea of how this works. The action here is, I would say, is evaluated. So let's move that forward. And now who is doing the action? And it's very interesting because when you read the sentence, you have no idea who's doing the action. It says, I'm going to make a new space here at the bottom. The component of the allowance for retail finance receivables that collectively evaluated is based on who's doing the evaluation? Management. Or I'm going to do something very dangerous. We. Because we are writing this, we are management. So I'm going to say we evaluate the allowance for retail finance receivables based on a statistical calculation and our judgment. A combination of forecasting models is used to determine the allowance for loan losses. Well, you know what? That's really what this is about. So I'm actually going to put that at the very beginning because I want a topic sentence at the beginning. The first sentence of a paragraph is the topic sentence. It should explain what's going on. So this is part of clarity. So I'm going to write here, instead of saying a combination of forecasting models is used to determine the allowance for loan losses, I'm going to say we use a combination, or wait, I'm going to, better yet, to determine the allowance for loan losses, we use a combination of forecasting models. So now the first sentence is a topic sentence. That goes back to clarity, where you want to organize your thoughts more carefully. So I'm moving them around. And I've got the very key idea here. This is about determining the allowance. That's my first sentence. And then I evaluate the allowance for retail financial receivables based on a statistical calculation and our judgment. And again, I can use the term we because I'm management and I'm doing the work. If I just say it happens by itself, factors that are considered, who's doing the considering? You don't know. Factors that are considered when estimating the allowance include, let's look at the next sentence, include the percentage of historical delinquency, migration to loss, and the probability of default and loss. Using factors including, I'm going to do something very dangerous here, and I'm going to use bullets. The percentage of historical delinquency, migration to loss, and the probability of default and loss giving default. Now, this next sentence is a little tricky. The loss confirmation period is a key assumption within the models and is the average amount of time from when a loss event first occurs to when the receivable is charged off. Again, you got to think about what's the verb here? What is the real verb? And then what's the subject? The subject is we, because we're doing the work, right? So to me, it seems like, and you might look at this and see it a little differently. To me, it seems like a key verb here is assume. We assume that the loss confirmation period is the average amount of time. We must assume a loss confirmation period. That is, comma, the average amount of time from when a loss event first occurs to when the receivable is charged off. The imaginary amount of time between a loss event, this is for concise, and the receivable charge off. An evaluation of overall portfolio credit quality based on various indicators is also considered. But wait, I got a better idea. The probability of default, wait, these are more factors, right? So I can just put these into bullets, comma, and evaluation of portfolio credit quality based on, I don't need to say based on various indicators, and I don't need to say it is also considered. And it's a little more correct, I think, here to put semicolons, but that's a very fine point. I know that every paper I get now is going to have semicolons. And there you go. To determine the allowance for loan losses, we use a combination of forecasting models. We evaluate the allowance for retail finance receivables based on a statistical calculation and our judgment, using factors including, period, factors include. See, even when you see a situation where you could cut out a word, you can do that. And now it's a little clearer. Factors include the percentage of historical delinquency, migration to loss, the probability, and you know what? I'm going to take out the probability of default and loss given default, loss confirmation period, the average, and you know what? To make this clear, this is what I'm talking about, and evaluation of portfolio credit quality. So now you've taken this gobbledygook here and you simplified it into a much clearer expression of your ideas. So just to go over it again, conciseness, remove unnecessary words, organize your thoughts carefully. Think about how you want to put everything. Like over here, I move this sentence to the beginning because this sentence summarizes, tells you what the paragraph is about. This way, someone could just read the first sentence and decide if they want to read the paragraph or not. Cliches. I don't think there were any cliches in here. Maybe there were some gobbledygook is nonsense that people don't understand, and you got to put that out. And point of view and voice says who's going to be doing the action. What is the subject of the sentence? Here, it becomes we. And it's really okay to use the first person, to say we. a substitute. Some companies will say management uses. They'll say it that way. And even that's okay. And that's better than saying a combination of forecasting models is used. Thank you for watching this video. I hope this helps to explain some basic ideas. And everyone can rewrite something in different ways. The idea is to explain things in a clear way so that your reader is going to understand what you're talking about.